AI is already here, so you have to adapt. You're going to have to learn how to integrate it into your company. If you don't, you're going to kind of be left behind a little bit by all the other companies that are already doing it. One thing that I've been seeing though is that like AI has to use humans to mimic versus humans can make out of nothing and we can create. And so AI will never be that.
So tell me about how you got into filmmaking. Go back to the beginning. What was that journey?
That's back in like when I was little, because my sister was in the industry, and even in high school, her and her friends would make movies. So they would always cast me as like the little kid in all of their stuff. So I think that I got my love for film definitely from her, and she did a lot of theater growing up. And then it would be about middle school that me and my co-director, Oliver Smith, just started making comedy sketches in middle school. And like people thought they were funny, and we did it in high school and made videos for like the rallies at the school. And people just like loved them. And then I also have to shout out my English teacher who let me do films instead of essays. And I would make people laugh. So I think that's kind of where like my love for it really started. And then going into college, me and Yo-Yo or Oliver started to make YouTube shorts, and they just kept getting more high quality over time. And we weren't getting millions of views, but we're grabbing the attention of a lot of like the higher end YouTube people. And that's kind of where it sparked the idea of starting like a video production company and us wanting to do movies. So that was pretty much like where all of that probably started.
So how do you describe your business? Like, what are you known for?
Right now, we are known for comedy advertisements. Interesting enough, we have like kind of three branches of the company. So Action Studios is like an umbrella. And then our main thing is action VFX comedy ads, kind of the ones that you might see on like Super Bowl type stuff. Just because one, we like humor and we like big epic things. It reflects the types of movies that we want to make, but we also know that the internet loves memes and to laugh and all that stuff. And I remember all the advertisements growing up. My favorite ones were all the ones that made me laugh. So that's what we're mainly known for is action ads right now. And then we obviously do TikTok and a lot of other stuff on the side, and we work with social media people with our other company known as Social Jump. So managing those two things.
Okay, that's interesting. So I wanted to get into that. I didn't know the breakdown. I wanted to talk about different channels and like how you think about that. But before we go there, what's it been like building a company? I think this is something we could riff on because people don't, you just kind of see the output, the videos and whatnot, and there's just so much in building an actual business. So tell me a little bit about that journey, what that's been like for you.
Rough. I think anybody that really wants to build their own company can kind of relate that I think you see a lot of this stuff on like the internet where it's like this person started making millions of dollars doing this thing, and then the one thing that I started realizing is like there's a difference between building a long-lasting company versus being an artist or an individual that's doing very successful. And those are a little bit two different things. But building a company is definitely not easy. And I remember my dad always telling me, he's like, look, it takes 3 to 5 years to really start a company. And we're about our 4th year. And now I'm like, yeah, I totally get like, there's a difference between us being successful online and getting millions of views here and there versus like structurally building something that grows over time and financially is stable. Those are drastically different. I think that over the years, we've really been learning the difference between that and what it means to like build an S Corp versus LLC, all the tax stuff that you have to learn. Like I went into it wanting to be a filmmaker, and I came out of school becoming like a CEO business type, which is just totally not what I went to school for. But I also love it. And I think that's one thing too, is building a company that's like long-term, because our whole goal is to like become the next Disney or something like that with characters and multifaceted. And so that has been a very uphill battle for sure. And I think that we look really good on the outside, but internally there's just obviously it's a lot of work and it's a lot of wearing hundreds of hats to move it forward. So, I mean, as much as you know too, you run your company, it's like it's not as easy as people will tell you. And I think I actually read this stat the other day where it was like couples that start a company together have a lower divorce rate because it's like one of the hardest things you'll ever do. And if you can get through that, then you can get through anything. So yeah, it's been an uphill battle for sure.
So you said you like feel like you come out of school more for CEOing. Like, has that taken some of the magic away from you? Like, how do you think about how much you have to put into being an entrepreneur and being a leader versus just being creative or being either behind the camera or in front of the camera or just, writing scripts? Like, how is that shaken out for you sort of emotionally?
It's a roller coaster, that's for sure. Our company, it's really interesting because our company kind of goes back and forth where the more that I am in a creative sphere and I am acting and being a goofball or whatever, is when we tend to creatively blow up and do really well. And then when I have to take a back seat and start playing CEO, all of that stuff slows down, but the company structure grows. And so that's actually been a really large debate in our company is like trying to get me more as a face and doing more entertaining things kind of helps us go that direction. But at the same time, when I'm doing that, the company vision kind of slows down a little bit. And obviously, if we had like all the money in the world, I'd probably hire another creative director to step in. But it is like a mental toll back and forth because that is it's a weird dichotomy that we are finding where every time I'm not in the creative seat, I'm in the CEO seat, but it helps the health of the company. So we kind of teeter back and forth, and we're, that's why sometimes our company, you'll see like we go through these waves of getting millions of views and then we like stop and then we are doing more business stuff. So it's been a battle for sure. I think I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate all of it. And I think I'm more in a position where I'd much rather set up everything long term and very stable before I jump into the creative realm versus vice versa. I guess I could do the creative realm, but it doesn't really set up things very like stable. So I'm kind of doing it backwards, I guess. So it's
what has sales or lack of sales contributed to those cycles of you being more creative on screen or off? Like, how has sales been for you? I know that's like one of the biggest challenges for most companies, and it certainly has been for us.
Yeah.
Like, we had many years of just like, okay, how do we need to eat? Like, what's next, right?
Yep.
How's that been for you guys, like deal flow wise?
That I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. Like, the more the company side is bringing in clients, the more creative we get. The less the clients start coming in during waves and seasons, the less creative we get because I can't really outsource or move team members or do certain things because obviously money talks and like money moves things. So recently we've been really hyper focusing on building out like our funnels and our systems in hopes that, it kind of just starts to snowball itself so that we garner more and more freedom to go do that type of stuff. But yeah, we like when it goes in waves and seasons, then we can't do as many creative things.
You mentioned that creative director, but other than that, are most of your big bucket roles filled? Like, I know for me over the years, it's always been, like you said, wearing many hats. And I'm always like, yeah, but with one more client or two more clients, I can hire this. And like always wanting to crack that nut of having leaders of departments where you feel like you're there, or do you feel like not even close, or where do you land?
That's what I'm trying to do. I think the vision for our company is definitely there, and we've seen it in little micro bits because I work with about 6 people now. And each one of them are wearing multiple hats, but they're kind of taking sections. So like we have one of my creative directors or leads is Nathan Romley, who's heading all of Social Jump for me. And then I have Andrew Bear, who is basically on the action ad side. So we do have people kind of wearing those hats. We're just kind of more in a phase of needing the cash flow to come in a little bit more consistently to then start building out the teams because we know how the pipelines would work. It's just you need the clients for the wheels to kind of start turning for sure. So yeah, I think that's we're kind of in like the same vein. And then obviously trying to figure out like in the meantime, it's like, do you partner with companies? Do you make deals with certain people? How do you make equity plays? Blah blah blah. Like what do you want to do longevity wise with stuff? And so yeah, we're kind of in that phase of like, okay, we know what to do when we have a lot of money and clients, but right now we need to get that first, which is why we're kind of focusing more on the sales funnels right now over a lot of other stuff.
Our audience is kind of a mix between entrepreneurs and storytellers and people who want to be content creators and stuff. So I'm gonna ask those tough questions because it's what everybody wants to know. So how often have you been like us and like had existential crises when you're like, oh, there's no money in the bank account, and okay, this week or the next 2 weeks the core team is going to have to punt payroll until we can catch up, or like what are sort of some of your battle stories that are like that?
Oh, dude, every day. That feels like it's almost every day. We're like, it's like a roller coaster, I think, too. That's where I think, talking to mentors and having a lot of like really wise people around me, really encouraging me that it's like, again, like a company does take like 3 to 5 years. Typically, it can take more depending on what you're trying to do. And like, there are seasons where we're like crushing it and then we tank really,
Yeah.
really fast. But that's kind of why we're focusing on like, okay, how do we build a very sound structure? Because we go like me and my producers have like sat on the floor and looked at the ceiling and been like, what are we doing? Like what is happening? And then the next week we're flooded with more clients that we can like the bandwidth can handle. And so I would say that a quote or like one thing I always heard when I was like growing up was that like you only see the success stories like once they've done all the work in the background that you never got to see. And I think that that's kind of because of social media, you see that a lot where it's like, oh, just like these success stories popping up everywhere. And then you hear their stories and it's like, oh no, it took them years to get where they're at. And granted, yes, you do have like these random pockets of like success stories, but for the majority, it really is like most of these people that become successful, there was hours and hours and days and years of work ahead of like before that. And I feel like we're doing the same thing. Like, I think a lot of people will look at our social media stuff and be like, oh, these guys are getting millions of views. It's like, yeah, but also in the background, we're freaking out and like trying to figure out finances and do all this other stuff.
Totally. We founded in 2007, and it was a solid 7 years of pain before we could even just be kind of normal, kind of think like, oh yeah, we're a real business, cash is flowing, and there's people doing things. Like it took a long time.
Yep.
And then another, I would say, 4 years before we crossed into seven figures. And that, it's just like, and even still, I'm like, yeah, but it's not enough because I want to do this, this, and this. And I wonder if that ever really changes. It's just like the problems or the mountains you want to climb are just a little bigger or something. But it's important, I think, to hear each other's stories. Otherwise, you just think you're alone as an entrepreneur in it, and that it's different for you than it is for someone else.
Yeah, I agree. It is a. I think that you're also right. It's like the more that you grow, the more you want to do bigger things. And so I don't know if it ever changes. I think that me and my team have really tried to be like, look, even when things are hitting the fan and we don't have a lot of money, like we're about to host a film festival in June. And because I really want to get people creating more, like our network is really talented, but they're not making a lot of stuff. And so we're making a film, and right now we don't really have the bandwidth to do so, but we're like, I heard this from the CEO of Disney, what was it, Bob Iger. It's like he made a point to make Disney have creativity at the center at all times and then innovation. And I told my team, it's like, look, if we stop creating, we're never going to become the movie company that we want to become and the creative company we want. So it's like, even in the hard times, we are trying to lean on what we really want to do, which is creativity. And it's not easy. Like right before I got on here, we were like on calls trying to figure out like how we're going to do this. And we figured out a way, and it's a lot of time and energy, but we also know that it's like really vital for us to stay creative, even when we don't necessarily have the resources, because we want to keep that at the epicenter.
Did you read that book, Creativity Inc.?
Yeah, a little bit.
Ed Catmull. Yeah, that's another one that's really good around that, right? Like they saw it in their DNA that their part of the recipe for success was to be uncomfortable with the next level of innovation at all times. And it's like the moment you think you got it in its old hat,
Yep.
that's when you're probably dying, right? But if there's that level of risk in the innovation, and I've certainly seen that too for us, like it's always a gulp. It's always a gulp, and it's the gulps that actually end up becoming something good or important or meaningful. So yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that. So I started to say some of your shorts have thousands and others have millions of views. What's been kind of surprising to you about that? Have you noticed, have you ever been able to kind of put your finger on what makes one thing better than another? Or maybe it's not fair to even say better than another, it's just what is hitting. So talk to me about some of the surprises you've felt in that journey over the years.
Yeah, so we kind of have cracked the code a little bit. And it's kind of what we walk a lot of our clients through. It's also why we kind of started doing humor. It's funny because it's like, okay, we'll work on some really high production value stuff, and we'll distribute it, and it gets a couple thousand views. And then I'll spend 5 minutes on a TikTok video, and it gets 20 million views. And we started asking ourselves, like, why is that? And so one of it's just the platform. So really understanding when you're on a certain platform, what do people want to watch? YouTube has a formula, TikTok has a formula, Instagram has a formula, theaters and streaming services have a formula, because when you're going to that certain platform, you're internally, like if you go watch a movie, you're ready to sit for 2 hours. Like you're ready to do that. On TikTok, you're ready to scroll past in for 3 seconds. YouTube, you kind of need every 5 to 10 seconds something needs to happen, and if it doesn't, no one cares. So that was like one thing that we really started to figure out. Is like, okay, these are all streaming platforms. So, but like, how are you going to stream to them? And then the next thing that we really noticed was that the amount of production value never really mattered if your story or the thing that you're telling the audience wasn't funny, relatable, or interesting, right? So like, story was king. No matter what, your story is king. Doesn't matter how cool your stuff looks. The cool factor gets you in rooms with clients and other people who want to make big, epic things, and that's a really good thing. But the thing that garnered millions of views was the relatability in some of our sketches. Because again, like we would shoot with an iPhone, but we knew that everybody was talking about this trend. And so we would take that and then add our production value on it, because we do a lot of VFX stuff. So we would find a trend, do something comedic, but then, oh wait, the formula was kind of like Jimmy Neutron or something. Something goes wrong with Jace. Always. That's the formula. And the more and more I started talking with other influencers in the YouTube space that are like really big, they kind of have already learned that formula and like what works. There is a way that you kind of do these things that hits the nail on the head for a lot of your audiences. So that's kind of more or less what we found is like, where are you distributing? Your story matters. Is it relatable? Can you actually do something? And we just learned personally that we do humor really well. And so if you can garner an emotion with somebody, they're going to like your stuff, and we can do comedy really well. Maybe we don't do drama really well, but we can make someone laugh, and so we make you feel something, which is what we kind of figured out. So
You actually do drama pretty well, and I think anyways, I'll come back to that in a minute, because I saw that short you did called Candyman, and I freaking loved it, dude. I don't like short films. Like, I'm a feature guy, and unless they're really funny, like really funny short films. I'm a sketch comedy guy. I love watching series that are just built on sketch comedy. Came up through watching SNL and other things like that. But that short that you did, Candyman, pulled me in, and part of it was just the set, and part of it was the acting, and part of it was the directing and just composition, and then overall you actually had a message, and I couldn't quite see where it was going, but it still had my attention. So I won't give anything away, but our viewers should go check out Candyman. I'll leave the link in the notes. But Good job on that. And was that like something? Do you ever just like give yourself projects like that to sort of advance yourself as a director?
Yeah. We kind of try to like we actually have another film that we just completed. We try to do a film like once a year at least because again, keep creativity at the center. The funny thing about that project though is that we actually wrote and shot that in a week.
Wow.
Um, yeah, that's like the story. Like I took a photo. I got really inspired. I wrote the script. I showed it to my producer. We got the team together, like 35 people. We shot it in one day, and we did it for a competition that we came second in for the Aperture like this contest. And we found out that we only had 24 hours to edit it because we thought we had 2 days. Found out we had 24 hours, and we got it in 10 minutes or like I think 5 minutes before the deadline was. So that one was like it was nuts, but I think that one unlocked for me writing what you know, and that yeah, it wasn't funny, but I had something to say. I've made a few other short films, and we do a lot of fight stuff, and our people like our fight stuff, but they don't really have a lot of story behind them. And a lot of it's because I didn't really have a lot to say. But Candyman was like right when I became a believer, like a Christian, and I was really trying to dive into like what truth is. And so that short film was just me wrestling with like once you know something, are you willing to fight for it? That was like
Wow.
the whole. So
Well, that came through in the short. So good job on that. So talk to me a little bit more about that, what you were just mentioning. So it's clear to me that the message matters to you. So what makes stories meaningful, or how important is it to you for stories to be meaningful as opposed to just entertaining?
that's a super good question. I think my opinion on it's kind of differed as I've gotten older and as my faith kind of changed. I think that there's a time and place for entertainment where people just need to like turn off, and I think it's really helpful when it is entertaining. Because I know that like I've gone through really hard times, and sometimes you just want to watch something that helps you escape for a little bit, and that helps a lot. However, I think that I grew up with like Lord of the Rings and Narnia. Like that was like my thing that I wanted to make. Like that's what I want to make. And I think that there's just something ingrained in us that loves stories and wants good stories. And I think it helps us reflect reality more. That's why like the core message of characters are so important because it's saying something about one, our broken world. How do we overcome certain things? What is true? I think that the way that I started viewing stories was like, okay, you take a concept like truth, and what happens when you can stretch it all the way to its logical conclusion? Can you show the bad parts of it? Can you show the good parts of it? And then where do we end up? And I think that that's just something that story can do over a lot of other things, is to like physically show an audience or a person like, yeah, you could do this thing, but look at what happens. Like one example that I always love talking about because I talk about with my mentor is Breaking Bad. It's just
Mm.
like that is a whole spiral of somebody going down like a sinful route or whatever, and it doesn't end up well, right? It's like what happens if you did this? It's like look how bad this turned out for this character,
It's a
and so you
long
can do that.
cautionary tale.
Exactly. And so I think that there's something more powerful about imagery and stories that you can kind of get across those ideas and be like, oh, huh, that is what would happen if you did this thing. So I think that's why it's really important. I think it helps us just kind of, just like science does, kind of discover more about like, our observable universe and the unseen things like love and truth and morality, those types of things.
I want to hear more about that, but I missed a couple questions, so I'm going to bounce back and ask them because I think they're worthwhile. So what was it like growing into your team? Like you started with a close group, probably like you said, buddies shooting things, right? What have you
Mhm.
learned over time in terms of like what it is to have the right people in the right seats? Have you actually experienced like, oh, okay, no, this person's a filmmaker, but I needed someone different for this role or whatever? We certainly have gone through that, so that's why I want to ask the question.
Yeah, that's definitely, when you start something, you typically want to start it like with the people that you know, but sometimes that gets very difficult, right? And so one thing that I think that I have been learning is it is better to wait and find the right person than to rush and just fit somebody into something, and then all of a sudden you're kind of like left with all these problems. Uh, I think that the tendency when starting a company, especially for me, was just like, okay, whoever's willing. Like, I think there's a balance that I'm finding between someone who's like ready and willing, and they'll do anything to like make it work is great, and you want that. But at a certain point, it's like when you're a producer, you're a producer. If you're not a producer, you're not a producer. If you're a sales guy, you're a sales guy. If you're not, you're not. And so I think that I've been really trying to find that balance between somebody who's like eager and will do anything, but also their adaptability and their ability to learn has been a huge thing for me. It's like if I can see somebody, like if I give them something and they can learn it very quickly, I'm like, okay, you're somebody that like I can put anywhere and you're gonna figure it out. I forget what it was, like The Pursuit of Happiness or something. It was a movie, but there was like a quote where it's just like, I don't know some of these things, but I'll figure it out. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of people that you're looking for.
Yeah,
so.
those people they're gold. I've seen it too. Our history is filled with them, and I've narrowed it down to sort of that entrepreneur spirit. But there's many people who are not willing to be entrepreneurs, but they have that problem solving and that innate hunger, that thing that just makes them want to figure things out and try new things. And I heard someone say last year that the old phrase "jack of all trades" was actually incorrect, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you heard this, but I heard that the original saying was something like, he was a jack of all trades and a master of none, which is often more valuable than a master of one. And somehow over time, that meaning flipped 180 degrees. Like, oh, I'm just jack of all trades, master of none, like it was a bad thing. But having people that actually go after learning new things, I'm with you, man. That's gold. That's what we've seen too.
You can find those people. They're very rare too.
Yeah. And like I said, they don't always want to build their own thing. Some of them don't have the risk tolerance, but they can thrive inside of an organization, and sometimes they are building their own thing, and you have to kind of woo them into your corner.
Yeah.
Some of the best ones are anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you manage your clients' expectations about views and like what the outcome is going to be? Mm-hmm. How do you frame that and sell it? Like, I imagine you probably have run the full gamut on clients that think that it's going to be X, and you have to be like, listen, here's the expectations. So talk to me about that a bit.
Yeah, that's actually something that we've recently kind of learned, is that you never want to promise views you can't. Like, you just never know. However, there's formulas. So if you think about it, the way that we've been visualizing it for advertisements or social media posts and things like that is that I can't guarantee views, but just like a film, if you have an A-lister attached, if the script is about XYZ things and it hits this type of audience, right, you are at least expected to be hitting in a right direction. And that's what they do for movies, is that like, okay, look at the video game audience or like the people that like fantasy films. It's very large. So most likely if the story's good and it resonates with them, it's going to do well. And then if you have like a Brad Pitt or somebody attached, like you're going to do well. And then whoever your directors are, whoever your DPs are, etc. So that's kind of what I walk a lot of our commercial clients through now, is that like, look, who's your target audience, who are you trying to hit? Here's how we're going to hit them. Here's the plan. Here's the script. It works well for your brand. And here's typically what we're seeing that works within the industry. And then from there, it's kind of just like making sure that the script is good. And I think the other thing that we kind of have too is VFX on a lot of people, because people like to be entertained with something very spectacle and awe-inspiring, but then comedy's if you can get a good joke in, it's also great. So we kind of write it out more like a formula where it's like, look, we're not going to guarantee millions of views, but like we're at like a 60 to 70% potential success rate, and that's really all you can really promise. Anybody else that walks in and promises their clients, oh, you're going to get 60 million views, it's like you can't. You don't know what you're doing. So
For ads, what are your main distribution channels? Is it all like online streaming? Is it? Well, you said that the company's broken down to two different companies actually. So talk to me. Maybe that's the more appropriate question. Talk to me about where those companies break down. What you do in, you called it Jump Social.
Social Jump.
Social Jump versus Action Studios. Describe it a little bit more in detail for me.
So we have Action Studios, was the umbrella company, and then underneath that, I split up the company because for advertisement's sake, it's like you want to specialize in one area and advertise in one area, right? So we broke it down into Action Ads. So that's all advertisements. So that's social media advertisements, that's streaming advertisements. We don't do TV advertisements. You can garner, I think, a lot more viewership on social media nowadays, and just like specifically target a lot better. So we've done a lot of social media advertisements there. And then Social Jump is our section of our company that comes alongside influencers, the creatives, and we more or less become like the production company for them, so they can focus on being the creative, and we focus on the editing, the distribution, ideation with them. We'll sit down and be like, here are some things within your vein that you should think about making because it'll do really well. And then packaging and all that stuff. Like packaging is a huge thing on social media that we've learned. So we kind of more or less come alongside the creative so that we're their team and they can just focus on being the creative.
And what's your model like? Is it one-off? Is it packages? Is it retainer?
It's mostly retainer. Right now, the model that we're in is subscription based. So they pay monthly. And the hope is obviously to save them time, help them build ideation. And then two, the social media game is about output and quality at the same time. So we typically look for higher end clients that we can work with. Like right now, we're currently working with like the Professor, the basketball YouTuber.
Yeah.
And a few others like that. So people that are already kind of high end, they know what they're doing, but they just kind of need a steroid to help move them faster and have a team to help them succeed. And so we come along like clients like that and kind of pick and choose the ones that we want to work with, that we think that are on the rise, and come alongside them to help make their stuff.
That's super interesting. So in each case, are those clients, do they have other things to sell, or is it usually the social channels themselves are monetizing? Like, I imagine they have multiple ways of monetizing.
Yeah, I mean, typically like an influencer, and this is actually another thing that we help them walk through if they're not doing it already, is that if you see a creator on the rise, the one thing that you want to walk them through is like you need to run your social channel like a business, and then ask yourself where's all the money coming in. So one is going to be your social channels. Two, it's going to be your brand deals. So the more output you can get and the more views you can garner, the more likely you're going to have brand deals in a certain niche, right? Which means more money. And then third is your merchandise or other things that you want to sell. We're going into the influencer economy now, where most people and brands are recognizing that like if you're a big brand face and then you launch, like Mr. Beast launch a chocolate bar, that's going to generate so much income for them. And so what we're trying to do is come along these companies or these influencers to help run their channels like a company, because they have the high opportunity to run it like a major business, start dropping products and all this stuff that's going to garner them way more money than even the sponsorship money, which they make a lot from. And so that's kind of what we're trying to help those influencers get towards.
That's sick. Yeah, I mean, distribution is one of the biggest problems for every business, right? And that's just built in with influencers that have an audience. So totally feel you on that. And then so for the ads, you do run all the analytics and the targeting and the full campaigns. And so how did you get into that side of the business? That's a very kind of marketing and science side of the business. And it's in all full transparency, it's a part of the business that we've never really broken into on this end. And I've always been very jealous of fellow production companies that do. So talk to me about that. Was it just trial and error? Did you hire good good ad buyers, or like what was that journey?
The short and quick answer is partnership. So we do focus a lot more on the advertisement, but however, we realize very, very quickly that the numbers are really what speak for your ROI. Like you do need good advertisement to help your brand look good, but a lot of times clients only care about the numbers. And so we partnered with a company that we worked with a lot when I was younger. And we kind of have like personal connections with them. So we partnered with their company to do a lot of the ad buying and then learning through what they're doing to do it internally and with them. So what I would even say is that like if you're a production company growing, if you can find a good company that's just doing that and partner with them, right? Let them be good at what they do and you be good at what you do. And then we just structured a deal that makes the most sense between us.
That's great. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we've done a bit of that, but never with the advertising management.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the future hold for Jace and for Action Studios? What do you want to see happen? And I know it's an uphill battle, but you're a visionary kind of guy, so I know you'll have an answer here.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to make the next major film studio that has characters kind of like Nintendo or Pixar, something like, or DreamWorks. We actually really love DreamWorks is doing a very good job right now. And so the current goal, which is also why we started the film festival stuff, is to start generating stories that have those lovable characters and make it a multifaceted company that does movie advertisements and then starts branching off into other stuff like video games and things like that. So that's the ultimate goal, which is I aim here so that even if I miss, maybe I miss here rather than aiming here and then miss here. So that's the long-term goal.
And how do you think about the distribution side of that? Where do you see streaming going? I mean, old Hollywood is kind of dead, but like, the future I think is still pretty bright. Talk to me about what you see.
Yeah, I don't think that movie theaters will ever die because we saw that with theater, right? Everyone thought, oh, once movies come out, then theater's gonna die, but that's not the case, right? So I think that movies are still there. I do think that streaming platforms and the internet is still a wild west. It's so new and it's changing so unbelievably fast. So I definitely see just that the way distribution works is it's the same but different. You just got to learn what platforms are doing well and what they want, and then what audiences want. And I also see that a lot of people just start going through waves. I think that streaming services and the internet has become very big, but that doesn't mean that movies and other things or different platforms like that won't come out. Because I think as a world, we kind of get bored of something after a while and we want the new thing. And sometimes the new thing is revamping old things. And so I think I've just been trying to keep an open mind. And I think that change is never a negative thing. It's just how can you adapt with things. And I don't know, it's new opportunities and new ways to tell stories. Like ultimately, I want to tell stories. So it's like you can do that through video games. You can do that through streaming platforms. You can do that through board games, all that stuff. That's also why I think I'm very excited to make a multifaceted company that tells like a unified brand story, but in every brand possible. So,
do you guys have conversations internally about AI and the disruption coming and the idea of, some people are saying that, it's going to write the script, it's going to animate the script, or, I use animate in the widest sense of the term. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly your movie is made. Do you think we'll get to that level? And what's your predictions as for AI disruption?
Yeah, I think that as a company, we've been talking about, okay, look, AI is already here, so you have to adapt. You're going to have to learn how to integrate it into your company. If you don't, you're going to kind of be left behind a little bit by all the other companies that are already doing it. One thing that I've been seeing, though, is that like AI they're not human, and AI has to use humans to mimic versus humans can make out of nothing, and we can create. And so AI will never be that. They'll just be using us as samples. And so one thing that I've been learning really quickly is that like one, everyone thinks, oh, AI is like so perfect, and then you start using it and you're like, oh, it's good, but it's not like perfect. And so we've been just using it as tools, right? It's like you go into a garage, and if you want to build something and you have all the tools to use it, great, right? And so all I'm actually seeing is I'm seeing a really, really high opportunity for people who might not have millions of dollars who wanted to make high end films can now make high end films. And it's always going to come back again, like storytelling is going to be key. And we actually use ChatGPT to help write our stories. However, it's never perfect and it's never going to have your vision as a director. And so I've just been using it as like a tool to kind of bypass all like the time work that typically goes into something, and now I can do it much faster.
Yeah.
Um, and so I see a really high opportunity right now, especially for like fantasy filmmakers and sci-fi filmmakers. Like you could do it for so cheap now.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So you're going to see a lot of that come out. So I don't know. I think that people freak out a little bit. I do think it's going to change jobs, but just like how when the internet came out or like technology came out, everyone was like, we're going to lose all of our jobs. It's like, no, all the jobs just change.
Yeah.
That's typically what happens, right? So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the old horseless carriage argument, yeah. First they laugh at it, and yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people that were really worried that, all of the big technological changes, you can map it out, that it was going to completely change everything. And like you said, it just shifts, I do think that there's certain situations where, when you have a crossroads of, a culture that may not want to learn what they need to learn to stay up with it, then it could get more polarized. You might see a little bit more of the haves and the have-nots based on the tools. Like,
yeah.
Back in you study wartime and the armies that had these advanced weapons, yeah, they really did have an advantage. So I'm with you. These are tools, but how do you use them? So we're having all the same kind of conversations internally here and making plans and using things and adapting. So that's pretty cool about your vision to be a multifaceted studio. How much research do you put into sort of those business models as a CEO? Do you study and look at the history? That's something I have neglected to do, and I'm just now kind of doing more. It's like I know I can learn a lot from just studying the companies that have come and gone and sort of embracing the change. But where do you stand with that?
I definitely could do it more. I think I do a lot of reading now and a lot of research, and you feel like you could always do more. And so there's a balance between just starting and doing versus like researching what people have done. A big breakthrough for me has really been trying to find mentors and other people who are already doing it, because that has helped me like bypass and cut so much time down on the research, just asking like, hey, how are you doing certain things? What didn't work for you? And because I can walk away from that being like, wow, okay, like I could have spent hours or days trying to research and try to figure something out. You don't really know what you don't know, versus if you go talk to an expert who's already doing it. Like I think like I got into real estate recently and got a first home, all this stuff. And the second I did that, I learned a lot. And the only reason I was able to do it was because I talked to a lot of other mentors who did it, and they ran me through all the stuff not to do. So my thing is trying to find more mentors and people that have already gone through the work, and that's also why I really love the whole like we need more elders and mentors, because you guys have been through it more than we have. And so I think anyone that's young, the best hack ever is just asking your elders what they went through and what they're doing. They already did it. So
yeah, well said. Yeah, I totally agree. It's as it relates to the craft, how much would you say over time as you learn to do things as a filmmaker, some of the magic wore off for you?
A lot. I think I don't view movies and art the same way in this industry as much anymore, because you're like, oh, everything's a formula. Like you start watching movies. So one thing I will say is that when I watch a movie and I totally forgot about all the beats and stuff like that, that means it was a good movie because I totally forgot that that was
Same here.
happening. Um, but I think I found a new magic in the excitement of being a creator, not a consumer, and finding a lot of joy in like the potential of creating the story, and not necessarily for myself. I think I've shifted my perspective recently into imagining the audience's response and how I can give them something that brings them joy. And I see that with like a lot of my friends and family that aren't in the movie industry. They'll watch my stuff that I think is terrible, but they're like, that was so cool, that was amazing. And I'm like, oh, right. Like, I know the behind the scenes, but you don't. And this brought you joy.
Yeah.
And so I think my perspective is a lot like just change where it's like, oh, right. Like, that's kind of where like the servant's heart mentality has kind of come in for me. It's like I was given these gifts and these talents. How can I use this to help and give somebody else joy with what I was given? You know, so
And there's a whole new magic in experiencing it through them. I totally agree that it becomes a different kind of fuel. It's certainly been that way for me too. What's your client breakdown as we're wrapping up? What's your client type breakdown? Do you do work for mostly for profits, for nonprofits? I have a couple specific questions about movements and nonprofits and sort of more missional organizations.
to be honest, that's something that we're still zoning in on with clients. A lot of the clients that we're trying to work with right now either have a product or something that they are pushing and wanting to sell the company or sell the product more. It's just easier for at least our formula to back a company that has a brand story around a product that they're trying to sell. So a lot of that's been a lot more for profit and for them trying to be a high end brand. We're personally trying to target people that we think, just like influencers, who are going to be high end brands based off of their products. Where it's like, yeah, that's a really good product. They might be in the startup phase, or they're like starting to move and they have the money and the resources to do something, but they just need the marketing now. So that's kind of trying to who I'm trying to target. Instead of like having a list of 100 clients, I'd much rather have a list of like 10 really high end clients and just cater to them and do my craft really well for them. So that's been the
That's
mentality.
that's the exact same thing for us in terms of quality over quantity. And yeah, for us, we have our retainer clients are mostly missional organizations. A lot of times they're larger nonprofits that are really trying to move the needle regarding getting their story out, letting people understand their values and what they're doing. And we've been singing the song of using entertainment, meaningful entertainment. In our world, that's more documentary series for a long time, and we're starting to see that sort of move, and the world is engaging this idea of branded programming or branded entertainment, where it is an organization that is bringing these stories, but the end consumer is engaging with it as if it's a Netflix show or something that is what they really want to watch. How much have you seen that or been in those conversations as it relates to entertainment, but for organizations? Do you guys touch on that at all?
Yeah, well, if I'm hearing the question right, like one thing that we're trying to really focus on is people that love advertisements or like Super Bowl advertisements. It wasn't because they were watching a commercial, it's because they were watching a story and they were entertained. And I think that that's where a lot of people miss the mark, is that like you're not just trying to get an advertisement out there, you're trying to convince that the audience that you want to watch this because it's fun. Oh, and then hey, by the way, here's a product. Um, and so we've seen a lot of that, where a lot of the comments that we're garnering is that like, oh, I totally forgot that this was an advertisement. And so we kind of pride ourselves on that, where it's just like they forgot that they're watching an advertisement. They saw a story. And I think it's really important. That's another thing I kind of tell a lot of our clients, is that you're building your brand story. So like you think about Coca-Cola, you think about all these high-end brands. When you think about their product, there's a feeling that goes with their product, right? Like you think of Bud Light and it's always like dilly dilly and it's funny. You think of Geico and it's a little Geico guy and it's funny. Or if you think about like Flow, like they have like these sketches. Or like my favorite ad of all time ever is Wells Fargo, and it's like, what are you wearing? Jake from State Farm. It's khakis. It's like they're the feeling that they give you just like makes their brand stand out because they make you feel a certain way. And so I think that's really important, is that like you're not doing advertisements. You're telling your brand story, and you want people, when they think of your product, to think of a feeling, right? That's what I try to focus on. And it's like Apple's not selling you an iPhone, they're selling you status.
No doubt.
That's why you like Apple, right? It's like you get status when you have an iPhone or whatever, or the next new whatever. It's status.
Well said. Jace, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on personal Instagram, so Jace Hardwick, and then TikTok is Jace Hardwick. And then our website is actionstudios.tv, and you can also follow us on Instagram at actionstudiostv as well.
Sick. Thanks for chatting.
Man, thanks for having me.